So it is coming up to a year since Patrick Dorgu first signed for Manchester United, and right now he is in the form of his life, with 4 goal contributions in his past 6 Premier League starts. He's becoming a very useful player. Now, one of the main reasons why Dorgu is such a useful squad player in particular is because of the fact that he can play in so many different positions, and he's done that throughout the season so far. This weekend against Manchester City, he was on the left wing, but we've also seen him on the right wing this season, we've seen a lot of him at wing back, and we've also seen him at fullback as well. And for a squad, that is such a useful player to have. It means that Dorgu isn't necessarily going to be a starter, a nailed-on starter at any point for this club, but it means that he's always going to find himself into the squad somewhere. He's always going to be an important player. One week that will be as a backup fullback, a backup winger on either side, and the great thing is he's got different traits from different positions. So if he drops into a fullback role, he's an attack-minded fullback, because he's played as a winger. But if he plays in a winger role, he can actually be a really good defensive winger because of his time as a fullback or a wingback. And it's actually making him a more complete player, and actually a real tactical weapon for Michael Carrick right now and whoever may be the next manager in the summer. Let's start off by talking about how Patrick Dorgu can be used as a tactical weapon in big games, just like he was this weekend against Manchester City. Now, Dorgu has experience as a fullback and a winger, so when he has played on the wing, you're going to get a couple of things. You're going to get a player that has the ability to defend, but more importantly, probably the willingness to defend. This isn't a forward who you've got to worry about being caught up the pitch and being lazy. Patrick Dorgu is a very dedicated defensive player, which makes him perfect for these big games. For example, when you're playing up against Semenyo, who didn't have the greatest game in a derby at the weekend, but we know, on paper, he's a massively threatening player and someone that could cause a lot of problems for Manchester United. So having a winger that you can bring into the side for these big games to do a double up job is almost perfect. We could see something similar this weekend against Arsenal and Bukayo Saka. Having Dorgu in this role, the ability to drop deep, double up with his fullback, sort of can help us nullify the opposition's threat. Particularly useful when we don't really have fullbacks that are 1-versus-1 specialists. We don't have an Aaron Wan-Bissaka anymore, so having Dorgu on the wing willing to drop in is very useful. But I don't know if you noticed at the weekend, you should have done because we've spoken about it a few times, he was also helping the midfield as well. So this wasn't just Dorgu dropping in as an extra 5-man defender, it wasn't that at all. In fact, a lot of the time he was actually filling in midfield, getting United into that compact 4-4-2 shape. But from this position he had a really important role to play. But I think it's great to see that he's a player who is comfortable in these zones. He spent so much time as a wing-back in the past year, so to then come and defend more centrally and do a very good job is a big credit to him, really, as a player. And perhaps his game intelligence, the ability so quickly to find a new role, pick up new responsibilities, and just sort of hit the ground running. He was so good at the weekend, sort of helping outside of the Manchester United midfield. We spoke about it the other day, that moment where Phil Foden's trying to break through, but Dorgu just doesn't let him. And this is why, for big games over the next few seasons, having Dorgu as this versatile winger who can do a defensive job on someone is almost perfect. It makes him the ideal squad player. Now, of course, for Dorgu to really be a useful squad player, particularly on the wing, he does have to bring us something on the ball as well. It's great that he can defend and get back into these zones, but he has to provide an attacking threat. And actually, from these defensive positions, he does. We all saw his pace the other day on the counter-attack, the powerful running forward. That's something which immediately makes Dorgu very useful, again, for these big games. But I think what was interesting in this game was the amount of different roles that he played. There were moments where Dorgu was incredibly high up the pitch, particularly on United goal kicks. We saw both Amad and Dorgu really high, essentially pinning the Manchester City defenders. And what this did was it allowed Mbeumo and Bruno Fernandes to go a bit more free roam and drop a little bit deeper and pick up different zones. And Dorgu and Amad, their role essentially was to stop these Manchester City defenders going with them. So in this moment here, Dorgu isn't actually touching the ball, but he stops the Manchester City defenders from jumping out and applying pressure. However, let's say if United were now in open play, particularly on the right hand side, and we were looking to cycle the ball across the back, then Dorgu's role quickly changed. And this is again where his versatility, his ability to operate in different parts down the touchline is very useful. There were a lot of moments, in fact, where he was actually coming towards the ball, dropping deeper and protecting it. And again, this isn't something that all fullbacks in particular can do, because you're playing that little bit higher up the pitch, which means you often receive the ball with your back to goal, which a lot of fullbacks struggle with because they're not used to playing in that position. But because Dorgu has spent time as a winger and also a wing back and, this position now, he's used to it. He's comfortable receiving with his back to goal. He's comfortable using his body, something that we were a little bit worried about when he first signed. How would he go from a weaker league? Would his power, would his strength still be there? And it absolutely is. He looks after the ball very well. But in this game against Manchester City, I think it was his ability to look after the ball, to protect the ball in these positions, but actually also to spin inside and allow United to access these central zones, which Carrick wanted us to do, before then quickly playing the switch to the far side. So Dorgu played a very important role, but again, it's different to the one we spoke about a second ago, where he was on the last line. It's ever changing. Now, something else I found interesting about this particular Dorgu performance against Manchester City was how something that I've criticised could actually be used as a strength in this particular game, which is quite interesting. See, Manchester United in this match were moving very, very fast at times. We were moving the ball forward. There were a lot of 1 versus 1 situations. There were people going for take-ons, forward passes, running into space, all of that stuff going on. And we've expressed a concern before, and it's this: when Dorgu's in a wide 1 versus 1, he's not exactly a specialist, but I think he knows that. He knows he's not this amazing 1 versus 1 dribbler. But in this game, there were moments where that worked, and under Carrick I can see that working, because Dorgu's instinct therefore was to slow down. He sort of knew that he didn't always have the beating of the fullback in front of him. So what he would sometimes do is race into this 1 versus 1 position, receive the ball, but then because he knows he can't dribble, he takes the extra touch, he slows down, he comes backwards and perhaps lays it off to a midfielder. Now, under Ruben Amorim, that may have been frustrating because it may have slowed down what we were doing, which isn't how we wanted to play at the time. But under Michael Carrick, a manager who wants us to have more control of the ball, especially higher up the pitch, having someone like Dorgu, who instinctively is going to take a backwards touch, might actually be a good thing for United, particularly in these big games, again, where you don't have so much of the ball, so you've got to look after it when you do get it. Now, there'll be other games where this is frustrating. If we play against a low block and Dorgu is constantly turning backwards, it will be a bit more of a concern. But again, if we are talking about Dorgu being a tactical weapon for certain games, having his ability to protect the ball with his physicality, his size, but also his technique, and his desire to play simple, actually sort of helped United get up the pitch together. Now, whilst that was borderline critical of Dorgu's attacking play, I actually think recently he has been much improved. I think he's been better in the final third down the left-hand side. And I think a lot of that has been because once in the final third, he hasn't been in a position where he starts in the space standing there. He's often been arriving into that space. We've seen a lot of wide combinations recently, not just under Carrick, but also under Darren Fletcher, where you sort of play a 1-2 around these zones and then you release someone forward. I think that's really suited Dorgu. It's allowed him to use his running power. So there's less emphasis on dribbling. It's more about attacking space. And I think Dorgu's done that well. In terms of the release, the cross into the box, he had a very good one last week, to be fair. But in general, I think it's fair to say this still needs work. Dorgu has improved. He looks more confident. He looks more lively in the final third. He looks more sharp. But the actual final product can improve. There's a lot of talk about him working on this in training, and that's great to hear. I think we have seen some improvement, but it's still a long way for him to go in that department. But of course there is. He's a very, very young fullback, and he's only been in England for a year. So it's understandable for him to have a weakness. If he can add a bit more to his crossing, then he could be really useful for us. Now, the final thing that I want to talk about is Dorgu's willingness and desire to attack the ball, particularly in the final third, especially if the ball is on the other side. And the reason why I want to point this out is because I don't think it's natural for a player like him. Usually. Normally, if we're talking about a fullback going into the final third, sometimes if the cross is coming in from the far side, we'll see a player who sort of hangs outside the box because they don't have that goal-scoring instinct, or again, desire. But that isn't the case with Dorgu. He of course got his great goal the other day where he steals in front of the defender, but that wasn't the first time we saw it in the game. Here, he was trying to make that run onto the last man, and also here, he wants the ball in the box. He's trying to make that movement into the attacking position. In terms of the goal itself, he actually makes an initial run in behind. He then checks back, looks where his teammates are, before then making another run across the defender to score the goal. Now, for me personally, this is something of massive importance. You've got to get numbers in the box, and you've got to have players who are willing to steal across a defender to get the ball. I don't know about you guys, but when I saw Dorgu score that goal the other day, it was a weird one for Manchester United to score in recent times. It sort of felt to me like a goal that Manchester United would concede, where the cross comes in, the defenders aren't sharp, and a forward steals in at the back post to finish. So to see Dorgu doing that in a Manchester United shirt was a breath of fresh air for me personally. It was a really nice goal for us to see, and I think it's something that we need, particularly with this 11. If this is to be an 11 that we are going to use in the second half of the season for bigger games, where we might have less of the ball and we have more counter-attacks, then I think Dorgu's willingness to attack the back post is very important, because we don't have that natural threat through the centre. you know, aerially. So having that player arriving at the back post in Dorgu could be very useful. It's something that I'm not sure Cunha would do so much. Cunha tends to sort of drift and float around the edge of the box. Having Dorgu's, again, fresh running power and desire to get into the box is, again, a weapon when we want to speed up in those moments. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Patrick Dorgu is suddenly this amazing, perfect winger that everyone should study and learn from, but I think we saw a lot in the game against Manchester City, which was really promising. The defensive role was obvious. We know that Dorgu can do that. We know that he can help back. He's hard-working, physically very good, and I actually think technically a pretty good defender as well. He's quite strong in 1-versus-1 situations. Also, seeing him tuck into midfield to help out was great to see. On the ball, as we've pointed out, he had a lot of different jobs to do. So for a young player to do that in a new system, in a new setup, I think it was great to see him picking up those instructions so early. Again, I think it points to an intelligence in a young player, which is very, very important. And then you got the final third, where of course he needs work. Like we said, he's a very young player, but it's clearly something there. There's a player who can be quite direct. He can attack the box. He can score goals, but also in other moments actually look after the ball and allow Manchester United to slow down and potentially gain a bit more control. So overall, I think this was a very good performance from Patrick Dorgu. I think he played very well. And at the moment, he's sort of in his best spell of form in a Manchester United shirt, I feel. And I think he can just keep getting better. There will be some games that don't suit him. For example, if United are against a newly promoted side who sort of park the bus and you want to break them down, you probably look for someone different. When United really want to take the game to the opposition, Dorgu may come out. But in these bigger games where it's very 50-50, very toe-to-toe, he's almost the perfect player for United to throw into these games. It reminds me of something that Sir Alex Ferguson would do. Of course, he would have his ideal 11s, but he would have those utility players that you bring in for certain games to do a job. And Dorgu could be that. So yes, a lot of praise for Patrick Dorgu. I think he played very well, and long may it continue into the future. For now though, nothing left to talk about though, so we're going to wrap the video up there. Thank you guys very much for watching this one. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like, subscribe, and get your notifications on. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.